Hi, Miles.
Wow. All right, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I think we'll get started. We got a packed agenda, and I would like to do our best to make sure we're keeping on pace. Welcome everybody. If you're not speaking, I would ask everybody to go on mute. I'd like to welcome everybody for joining the meeting today. I appreciate everyone's time. I'd like to start out by welcoming our new attorney, Bob Bauer, the Academy attorney. We worked with Bob a little bit earlier, and he'll be heading up Derek Langhauser's old position. So welcome, Bob. I know you're joining today for the first time with our board. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for the intro. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. I'd also like to start out really by letting everybody know we recommended having this board meeting remotely pursuant to some of the statutes that are in section 103 of our policies for inclement weather. You know, sometimes we miss these things, and it looks like today for most of us we hit it. So happy to see that everybody's home safe and sound and able to join remotely. So thanks for that as well. Real quickly, because we have so much going on today, I just wanted to this is the first board meeting that we've had since the loss of our 4 students. It's been weighing heavily on me and certainly been weighing heavily on the community at Maine Maritime Academy. Just want to let everybody know that we as a board have been thinking about you as the Academy, and certainly the families and friends of the students that we lost. So Jerry's going to give an update on the accident later on in his remarks, but I did want to mark that today as well. Just a horrible tragedy and beautiful vigil that was on campus, and happy to see that it was so incredibly well attended, and you know, I think it helped start the healing process for some of the folks, but it's ongoing, and I think it'll be with us for a very, very long time. With that, I'm going to pass it over to the president. President Paul, please proceed with your report.
Thank you, sir. And now I'll begin, Chairman, by thanking the service of 3 members of the board whose term has expired and will be leaving us, Trustee Day, Trustee Devine, and Trustee Wellington. I'm going to defer back to the chair for just a moment to make some brief comments about their term of service and thanking them.
Thanks, Jerry. You know, really has been my distinct pleasure to work with these 3 individuals. You know, as we know, these terms are not forever, and while sometimes you are happy that they're coming to an end, because it is a tremendous amount of work at times. It's a great group on this board, and I've learned so much from each of these individuals, and just personally really appreciate their contributions, which have been immense. You know, I started out my very first board meeting. I was sitting next to Mr. Wellington, and we've had a lot of fun over the years and seen some great things at Maine Maritime Academy. And Divine and I have a you know, quite a connection back from when she was babysitting my sister-in-law. So we found that out on one of our first meetings. So it's a small community, and you know, really nice to be able to sit next to some of these folks and learn so much from all their experiences. And again, thank you, and thanks Jerry for letting me have a couple of words there.
Indeed. If I may, Chairman, certainly the strength of this Board of Trustees and its caliber is the strength of Maine Maritime Academy. We've benefited from that over the years. I've realized that this is a unique board comprised of people with unique core skills and capabilities, including experience in the maritime industry, which is crucial to running a maritime academy. Soon we'll be coming forward with information about the new members of the trustees. There'll be a new student member. The governor has recommended one, a gentleman named Isaac Jerson, and the governor has appointed 3 others who will have their Senate confirmation hearings in the coming weeks in Augusta, and I'll be attending those, and so we'll provide follow-up with that. With that, the president's report, as you can see from the packet, I have identified a pretty significant, extensive list of items. And if I went into great detail on each one of them, it would dominate the entire board meeting, which is not my intent. So I will probably run through each one of them and then defer to the chair to take comments from those trustees who would like me to go into greater detail on any or all of them. Does that sound sufficient, Chairman?
I think that sounds great. I just ask everybody, and I'm guilty of doing this probably worse than anyone on here. If you want to ask a question, if you'll just hit the raise hand feature on Zoom, that will be helpful. Make sure everybody gets their questions in.
Thank you, Chairman. So first of all on the list is the update on the accident. I think the general consensus here on campus is that we have struck a proper balance between paying respect to the factors related to that from our past, but also maintaining our focus on moving forward. And we have maintained the additional level of counseling resources for those who are still in need of that. But we have also moved forward into this spring semester. I feel as though we've handled the external aspects of that appropriately as well, including communications and outreach and continued connectivity, both with the students that were affected, their families, and other external constituencies, including our media relations and keeping the trustees up to date. Moving forward, we can expect that there will be more on this topic. The extent to which it involves MMA is yet to be seen, but we should be aware that given the nature of that event, there is going to be follow-on activities from Maine State Police and District Attorney's Office. I would not be surprised if that occurs quite soon. And we have a separate team, communications professionals, standing by to address that appropriately to the extent that it's necessary for MMA to make a statement. Our statement on that would likely be very limited and very narrow until this plays out for a while. Second, internally, we are taking action. We have a separate group that is working with me to identify after actions that we can take to help reduce the risk of travel, particularly on the Castine Road. There are 13 items under consideration on that list, and I won't belabor you with each and every one of them, but there are things like rideshare, more communication about the risks of travel, including speed, possibly other factors that can affect the safety of travel, possibly even collaborations with other organizations on those topics, working closely with the Maine Department of Transportation to look at traffic control features, working closely with local law enforcement to increase presence, a whole host of issues. But just to let you know that we are working this issue internally and externally. I'll be glad to take any questions on that. Commencement. Senator Susan Collins has confirmed that she'll be our commencement speaker. We're very excited about that. This is a big year for MMA, big year for Senator Collins, big year for the MMA, Senator Collins relationship and collaboration, particularly on things related to the new training ship, but now also commencement. We are in very close and regular communication with her office on things related to the ship, including funding for the shoreside infrastructure, and we can go into more detail on that when we get to that matter. But she's been extraordinarily supportive. She ranks MMA and this training ship in her top 3 priority items among all, and that's saying a lot for the Vice Chair of Appropriations in the United States Senate. But we are driving towards commencement. Please, each of you, follow up with Rhonda regarding any preparations and procedures, including things like regalia on that. Update on legislative session. We're pleased that we're making some good progress in Augusta. We've put forth to them the single most aggressive governmental affairs campaign that this academy has ever put forth. Literally requesting the state to double our base funding from the state from 22% to being in parity with the cohort of colleges that have plus or minus 50% of our enrollment, which would take it to 44%. By the way, that number maps out pretty closely to what other host states provide on average to our peer competitor state maritime academies. Governor leaned forward a fair amount, added to our base funding an amount greater than we've ever gotten before. But given the rising costs and the initial proposed 2024 budget, even though she increased it by a major amount, 4.5% plus a $2 million each of the 2 biennial years, which baked in ending in 25 would be an additional $2.9 million to our base. Nonetheless, it still only increases us from 23% to 23.6%. So we are pressing forward even more aggressively through the legislative campaign to ask them to bump that even further. Made a presentation to the Joint Select Committee of Appropriators, House and Senate, and have been meeting one-on-one with each of them. We have a new governmental affairs consultant who's been performing wonderfully in building the relationships with those key members of leadership, including appropriators. And so far, the response is good. Can't tell you what we're going to receive in addition to what the governor has proposed. I am confident we are going to bump it further. And what I am trying to position is that over a 2-year period of time, we do reach that parity. It's possible that they stretch that over a 4-year, but even if they do stretch it over a 4-year, it would be the greatest increase to MMA's budget in any 10-year period of time, pulled off in 2 to 4. So we'll see how that goes, but we're making steady progress. Our level of presence in Augusta is significant. Rarely a week goes by that we're not in the Capitol now. And it's not just me. I've been taking select collections of persons from the Academy itself, from our provost to faculty to students, and really getting MMA out front and visible in the Capitol. Update on federal governmental affairs. I could take the entire day talking about this, but as to NSMB, for example, we're up against pretty significant challenge for funding the modifications to the pier, which is to say a lot of money and structured in a way that is not favorable to Maine. We started with an estimate apparently of $40 million to renovate our dock. That number is now up to 60. I suspect there are ways to get that down, but somewhere between 40 and $60 million, but on a reimbursable basis, 80-20 split Fed state. So that in itself would be $12 million that we would have to come up with. In reality, based upon what just happened as between MARAD and SUNY, where they really only received about 50% after they took a big haircut from things that MARAD peeled off. But at a minimum, it'd be $12 million that we'd have to come up with. My guess is it'll be 20 plus. And as to that 20 million plus, there's no reimbursement. As to the 80% side, ostensibly 48 million, but probably more like the high 30s. That's all on a reimbursable basis, meaning that we would have to come up with that money, build the dock, and then submit invoices for reimbursement. And as everyone on this meeting knows, we don't have those kind of funds laying around. So therefore, we are working aggressively in multiple tracks at the federal level, state level, potential bonding, possibly even commercial lending to bridge that gap. But much of that is directly connected to our relations with our Senate supporters, and can talk in more detail on that. They're doing everything they can to make the point that Maine is different. These other 2 colleges that have gone first, for example, SUNY and Mass, they both have university systems with infrastructure funds that confront that money. Maine Maritime does not. Broader appropriations, we're taking a historic level approach to seeking more funding from the federal government. Last year, we made some progress towards that. I tip my hat to Dr. Williamson, who almost single-handedly, certainly with the team, but single-handedly as a lead, procured a couple of CDSs, or congressional directed spending appropriations, one in multiple partnerships, but one to the tune of 2.5 million, one, I think, 1.8 million, something like that. And he did that on his own. I had little or nothing to do with that. This year, I just put forward to our 2 senators a request that is north of $30 million. Don't know how much of that I'll get. I'm in the early stages of that one, but that is about 25 million in programmatic and about 11 million in facilities. When I say programmatic in facilities, I'm not talking about asking for money to build the next new building for which I don't have the operational expenses to operate. I'm talking about programmatic things that are necessary for this academy now, and upgrades to our facilities that would otherwise be expenses that would come out of our own operational budget. And talk more in detail about those going forward if anybody would like. Working groups, I have 12 separate internal Tiger Team working groups focused precisely in small group efforts to make progress on significant issues. They range from developing a robust grant research and writing program internally here, elevating, working closely with Chris Haley and his team to take our major gifts efforts to a new level. Graduate enrollment is another example, a separate federal appropriations working group, a deficit working group. By the way, the deficit working group, I have self-titled our Back in Black committee, and I've committed that when we do get to a balanced budget, I'm going to play that AC/DC song. I have a separate working group on CPMD and continuing ed. I would say that Craig Johnson is firmly in lead with that and making good progress. And I suspect before the end of the day, he'll give an update on that. I have a separate working group on the Bowdoin and ways to press that flagship vessel forward in more aggressive ways that benefit our students, benefit Maine Maritime Academy, benefit the state, and benefit another effort of ours, which is to position Maine Maritime Academy as the Arctic Maritime Academy in America. That's just an example of some of those working groups. But another one is to expand our yacht donation program. It works very well. This working group is designed to simply get more of it and expand it and scale it up. Another working group is the development, redevelopment, renourishment of our offerings in the areas of in the area of nuclear propulsion and nuclear power, which follows a strong demand signal from both the maritime industry and the commercial nuclear power industry. And that working group has 6 or 7 faculty members, and I've added to that external contributors to that from the National Laboratories, Department of Energy, and other academic institutions with whom we'll partner on that. Dr. Williamson can speak more about it, but we're basically on track to bring back an introductory nuclear engineering course in the fall, and each semester add to that until we return to having a minor. We're also doing that in partnership in large part out of request from American Bureau of Shipping, which received a grant from the Department of Energy to do just that. And they've selected us to partner in it. That's an example of the working groups. One other is a little more funner, I would say, and that is to rebuild and expand our yacht club, which we previously called the cruising club, but getting a couple of vessels on the waterfront for these students to have some opportunity to spend some fun time sailing or cruising. And we're going to do that in a methodical and safe way, but open that resource up to them more and more. That's another example of a working group. Pending topics. I mentioned NSMV a moment ago. I feel like we're making progress with trying to stay on track with the current Gantt chart. We have gotten a couple of curveballs thrown at us. MARAD sprung on our design engineering team, which is in lead for the permitting. They sprung on them an additional requirement for a biological assessment, which took some time that wasn't built into the timeline. I think generally we are still on track, although the timeline itself, I still believe, is built around some expectations that are going to be difficult to meet, such as an entire competitive bidding process for hiring a contractor within a 30-day period of time. We're going to press like heck to pull that off. but there are areas of this timeline that I worry are still overly optimistic. But this is an area where there is no option to fail, and we're going to pull this off. But it's tough right now. We also have pretty significant permitting. We're pressing forward with the permitting on the federal level, NEPA, and Army Corps state level, which is a NERPA environmental permit. We had a public meeting as part of that procedure. We had a public meeting on February 6th in the town of Castine, which of course was noticed broadly. There were about 30 people attended in person, about 30 online. Pretty significant amount of support, but also a significant amount of questions, concerns about the renovation of this dock, including its height and the distance that it must be pressed further out into the water, and impacts on navigation locally from that. Pretty significant effort to move through the public land use planning procedures for that, but we have a team on board for that. I've retained a local land use attorney, the most experienced one in the area, and we have a separate team on that, and we're methodically working through that process. That will likely generate some attention, including press attention, that you'll eventually see as we address concerns raised by members of the public through those local land use hearings. But otherwise, I think we're making good progress on NSMV. We had the keel laying ceremony for it, major milestone for the ship itself, scheduled for March. Right now, the thinking, soon to be confirmed, I believe, is that instead keel laying ceremony will be in Philadelphia shipyard at the time that the training ship is there as part of its itinerary for its annual cruise. That event will be widely covered and widely attended by at least one U.S. senator, probably two, perhaps a governor, and other members of Congress. And I'll ask Craig and Rhonda to provide additional information about that for any who want to attend that. FYI, our design date for receiving the NSMV-3 training ship State of Maine is still October 8, 2024 officially. However, Tote Marine, the ship management company, shipbuilding management company, and MARAD are signaling to us that it is quite possible that our delivery will be sooner, not later. And we're working on strategies to accommodate that if necessary. U.S. Coast Guard exam pass rates, I'm going to defer that issue until the provost's report. Football and wrestling. We're making steady progress on football. Of course, we made the announcement. Coach Peed, Athletic Director Peed, tells me we've gotten good response from student applicants to that. He led a very well organized and managed search process for hiring the new coach. That concluded just this past week, and we went out with the press on that, and I shared that with everybody on the board. And I'll, if the chair doesn't mind, I'll defer to Steve for a real quick update on that. Is that okay, Chair?
That sounds great, Jerry. Thanks.
Go ahead, Steve.
Sure. We offered the position to Calvin Powell. Calvin is probably tailor-made for the role. There were a lot of different things we were looking for in terms of experience. And a few of those boxes that he ticked off included time at a maritime academy, time spent in a startup program, which is largely where we are. But his connection with the student athletes was incredibly important as well. So a lot of excitement from the roughly 30 students on campus who are already here. We're now at 10 firmed up commitments for the roster for next year, with about 15 more people who have applied recently in the last basically month and a half since we made the announcement. So I expect that our roster next year will be somewhere in the neighborhood 55 to 60, where I was originally thinking 35 to 40. But we are seeing a pretty quick uptick in terms of excitement, enthusiasm, and folks stepping forward who otherwise weren't considering us prior to this announcement.
Thank you for that, Coach. Chair, may I continue?
Please.
Closing out on football, so I've given an update to Alfond Foundation, both for compliance and just for appreciation, letting them know the progress that we're making. I have a call this afternoon at 4 o'clock with Greg Powell, and then I'm meeting with him in person in Portland next week to talk about that and possibly some other Alfond MMA matters going forward. Wrestling, we made an announcement to take our club sport to full NCAA wrestling or NCWA status as a complete sport, including Maine's only women's wrestling team, and of course a men's wrestling team as well. Response to that has been favorable. Looks from early response, looks like we'd be able to fill out a full roster with all weight classes in our first season. Our club team is doing very well, by the way. They won their conference championship. That's wrestling in the club conference, and I think we'll probably have multiple wrestlers who qualify for the nationals, which will be in Puerto Rico. So both wrestling and football fit our brand, fit our demographic, and fit some of our goals for enrollment. Making good progress on those fronts. I have an item on here called MME and cadet maintenance. MME is my own acronym. It means Maine Maritime Edge. It flows from a host of conversations, not just from alum, but others in the industry who have suggested that the historical, well-recognized distinction between an MMA third engineer or third mate on a ship is not quite as clear as it used to be. That the edge that we used to have is maybe not what it used to be. And so we've had some discussions within that group about what it is that MMA can do to get back that edge. And one of them that rises to the top is a need to modernize up and update the hands-on piece that has always been our brand. Central to that is maintenance, and those who matriculated through this place know what I mean by that. But it is a unique experience, and due to a host of factors, it appears as though our students are not getting the same maintenance experience that they used to, and we have an internal group that is working in close collaboration, leadership between our provost and our ship and a host of instructors and faculty members to get us back to a more robust maintenance program, including summer maintenance and including a larger amount of time during the semester when students are performing maintenance and getting immersed in that hands-on shipboard environment. CPMD, I'm going to put Craig Johnson on the spot here a little bit to give a quick update on the progress he's been making out in Bucksport. Craig, go ahead. Chairman, are you okay with me deferring to Mr. Johnson? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, a quick update on CPMD. What we're primarily focusing on at CPMD is relationships directly with basically the companies that we work with that hire our graduates and that take our cadets, in addition to my previous contacts in the industry. So we're trying to get MOUs with 24 companies right now and bringing their company or a portion of their training budget to CPMD. We're doing individual training alignments with each group. State of Maine Ferries, Hornbeck. We've had 24 companies on campus here in the last few months. So we're approaching them individually and not asking for a handout per se, but asking for a portion of their training budget and trying to be competitive. We're working with all the training companies in an alliance around the country. Jerry and I went down to Fort Lauderdale. We saw Maritime Professional Training, AMO. We've seen MEBA all in the last month or two, and we're aligning ourselves with pass-throughs through these organizations. So they don't see us as a threat, but more as an industry partner, sharing best practices and sharing customers in geographical regions. That extends into when the fire stack is complete, potentially using that as well. But predominantly right now it's focused around CPMD and training.
Just to put a finer point on that, I have been accessing Mr. Johnson's network of contacts in the industry, and in kind of a two-part strategy, been making the following case to those companies that are enjoying the benefit of this rich product that we produce. It goes something like this. MMA is very proud to produce a unique host of professionals that are a wonderful supply for your enterprises in a time when everybody's having a hard time in the mariner shortage filling billets on ships. We're proud to do that. And you compensate them well, and we appreciate that. However, we also need some help in running this enterprise that produces them. And so we're respectfully asking that they step up and make commitments for things like Craig was describing, a portion of their training to be serviced by MMA at CPMD, a portion by dollar amount, making commitments to a fixed number of graduate enrollees from their corporate structure that they would dedicate and purchase, maybe even in packages. But we're making that case, and so far the response has been fairly good. I'm going to lean on Craig here to give his estimate of the before and the after of our budget posture at CPMD, meaning net loss or gain now versus what he is projecting with this new model.
So with this model, what I'm predicting and putting forward into the 24 budget once it's completed is a gain from, I think we have on the budget about $500,000 in income, going up to a budget of 1.2 million. It's pretty aggressive, but I've gotten verbal commitments for about 700 now, waiting on MOUs here in the next few months. So I think it's a safe assumption that goes from probably a negative of 200 to a net positive of between 350 and 400,000. And we've got some additional gains coming in some of the stuff Dr. Williamson has been awarded to cover some of our overhead. And it's everything in Bucksport is in my consideration a hidden gem, and it can go nowhere but up.
Thank you for that, Craig. Next on the list, I have the foundation. So we have a bill sponsor, House and Senate, for our legislation that would enable us to create a foundation. It is being very well supported and received in the Capitol. Many legislators telling us that they are glad that MMA, while asking the state to contribute more to the base level funding, that we are willing to do our part as best we can by adding to our tools to raise revenue on our own in a self-help way through, for example, foundation. That bill seems to be moving along nicely. Once that bill, presumably, if that bill passes, we will then go through a process in collaboration with the Board of Trustees for putting in place the infrastructure, including the governance for that foundation. To that end, and in preparation of that, Chris Haley, myself, and Larry Burrill attended an annual AGB conference on foundation governance down in San Antonio recently, and got some good input and a lot of good networking, along with interfacing with the consultant that we had previously retained to provide the presentation to our entire board here several months ago, Mr. George Watt, who has set up multiple foundations and is recognized as a nationwide expert on creating them and managing them. So we're making some progress. We're not waiting to do anything until we can do everything. We're systematically moving forward to be prepared so that we can move with haste when possible. Alumni chapters, we've said that we believe that there is a need to provide additional levels of support in helping alumni chapters build their membership, but also looking at a few key areas where there are enough alumni to justify a new alumni chapter, one of which is that Southwest or Southeast Florida area, which was the genesis of this event that Craig almost single-handedly, certainly in collaboration with Chris Haley's team as well, but that Craig and Chris's team put together in Fort Lauderdale, which was very well attended. I think 78 people attended that. Not all of them alumni, but a fair amount of them. And there seemed to be quite a bit of interest in an alumni association in Southeast Florida. I suspect there are a couple of other areas where we can press forward with that. Making some good progress there, though. Also, we've looked at having an annual Admirals Dinner, not unlike those that are performed by our peers. And this is not to be confused with Night by the Bay, which is really a different demographic, a different audience. This is something quite different. I'll defer to Craig and Chris to give a quick update on that if the chair would indulge it.
Thank you, Jerry.
Go ahead, Craig, and then Chris.
All right. So we've worked. Chris and I are working together. We've chosen a general location in Houston. The large alumni populace down there. We're working on a few areas, bringing in some corporate sponsorship and kind of a great deal of other things. So we're hoping for. I think we're trying for around 150 the first time. I've been through a few of these and leverage our contacts, but also bring in close customers of the Academy, alumni, and a great deal of the corporate region in Houston. We've had some verbal commitments out of 4 or 5 larger companies that they'll attend, and we can hopefully use this to leverage forward and all growing our scholarships and working with advancement and Chris's team, and let Chris take over.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. The only thing I would add is I'm just waiting for a phone call from a potential venue, but things are moving as Craig mentioned.
What's remind the trustees the general magnitude of the Admirals Dinner that Mass Maritime holds annually?
Craig, you probably know more than I.
Yeah, it's between 600 and 900,000 a year. It benefits their scholarships. Traditionally, it's what creates their Admiral scholarship and their trickle downs that they use against us. So I think we can outdo Mass Maritime. We're just doing a different setup. So our corporate outreach and our partnership with the corporations in the maritime and power industry will greatly exceed Mass Maritime. They're not really a target per se, but we're across all the boards of what we're doing, whether it's admissions, advancement, the bachelor's program, CPMD, the masters. We're all looking for corporate partners, and we want to greatly have good relationships out there and keeping our current trends active day to day with the students. I'm talking to 10 companies a day, making sure that MMA is on the cutting edge of what the industry is doing, not us telling them, but the industry telling us what we should be producing.
Since we're in the arena of advancement, I'll bolt on a couple of issues that aren't listed. We are, hold on a second. We're in the, Mr. Haley and his team and Craig and I are in the process of developing strategies to make a significant campaign to increase the number of persons who have built MMA into their planned giving. Watch this space because you'll probably get some pressure from me if you're on this board of trustees. I'm going to look to our board members to join me in that effort. It's relatively painless, but we're gonna look at a campaign that seeks to add to the number of people who are members of what we call the Legacy Society, who have thought to build the academy into their planned giving. Similarly, we're working on a strategy to significantly boost the contributions that are hallowed donors who sponsor scholarships. We're going to essentially ask them to update the amount of their scholarship, as I'm willing to do for mine, and then seek in a increasingly aggressive way more donors for more scholarships. Those are a couple of areas in advancement where we're making some great progress. Since I'm in the area of advancement, I mentioned the working group on major gifts. We're making some really good progress there with really broadening our focus to more a larger host of potential philanthropic donors, but also pursuing individuals beyond our alumni base who are potential large gift, major gift donors. And we're working on pretty significant strategies to do that. Embark. Many of you may recognize that acronym. It is associated with SASH, sexual abuse and sexual harassment on ships. A major trend right now, huge focus in Washington, huge focus of MARAD, huge focus throughout the entire maritime industry, with a lot of pressure on all of the state maritime academies, flowing not just from the Midshipman X incident, but from a recognition by members of Congress and pressure from them for the academies to adjust and adapt to what they see as a host of protections, many of which exist by way of us being colleges, but that is Title IX, Title VI, our own internal cadet shipping training programs and so on. But right now, MARAD is pressing for a major amendment to our entire MOA, Memorandum of Agreement with MARAD, and they're applying a lot of pressure to that. We're currently in a drill among all of the academies and MARAD with all of our attorneys to try to synchronize their proposed solutions with what we have already been doing and what we know to work. It's a huge area of focus for us. Tremendous amount of efforts, probably many weeks. It's probably 20% of the total amount of time that Craig and I spend, and others on our team, on Embark, which stands for Every Mariner. Help me out, Craig. Every mariner deserves a respectful culture. Yes, but that's a major issue on the national level and among all of the SMAs. Schooner Bowden. So we have now hired a full-time captain, Captain Alex Peacock, very well experienced with many Atlantic crossings, former skipper of the Spirit of Bermuda schooner. I have a separate Bowden working group that includes him, of course, but 5 other captains who have skippered the Bowden on Arctic expeditions. And we said that we're not only going back to the Arctic, but we're developing a plan to do a series of Arctic expeditions over a period of 10 years. To do that, though, we need to raise the funds for it, both the costs for the expedition and also for the operational expenses of the professional staff, including the captain and at least one mate. Right now, we're planning to go to the Arctic in 2025. In the interim, 2024, meaning in just a few months, we'll do a shakedown initial cruise to Newfoundland. We've been raising money for that. The state of Maine provides to us, as host of its flagship, about $50,000 a year for some expenses. I added to that a request that they fund half of the cost of the next 2 expeditions to the tune of $147,000, which the governor put in her budget. It hasn't been controversial, and I'm confident that we'll get that. In addition to that, we're being very aggressive at looking at private sponsors, donors, and underwriters. Chair Oni met personally with the CEO of LL Bean, and we're working closely with them to procure a commitment from them for a significant gift to underwrite those expeditions. We're making good progress on Bowdoin. COVID, as many of you know, here in the state of Maine, the Maine Community College System recently came out with a new decision to eliminate their vaccination mandate. They did that about 10 days ago and made it effective immediately. The UMaine system has not done that, but based upon a lot of input that I'm getting and a lot of research, I fully expect them to do that before too long, certainly soon enough, so that that new policy applies to their incoming class. Here internally, we made a recent adjustment. We had made an adjustment in the fall saying that we would not mandate the booster anymore, although the mandated booster on the training ship in Bowdoin remained in place. Recently, we went through an extensive process of review, including input from doctors at Harvard Medical School, doctors on staff or on retainer by us through Northern Light, our own internal contributors through what we call an implementation team, and outreach and input from many other sources, including research on the latest data, and decided to lift that booster mandate from the training ship in Bowdoin. Soon, I think we, as we move toward the May 11 date, when the White House, President Biden, and the entire federal government will be lifting its emergency status declaration for the vaccination. Between now and then, I think we'll be evaluating our internal policy. Would certainly welcome any input from members of the Board of Trustees on that. Chairman?
None from me.
Communications and marketing. As you know, I came before you requesting a supplemental to our budget, even though we were in deficit mode back in the fall, because I felt as though MMA, central to MMA's growth and moving forward, was a communications and marketing scheme that was enhanced. You approved that budget. Included in that was the funding to hire a communications director and a marketing coordinator. We went out on the street pretty aggressively trying to find each of those persons, did not come up with the exact right fit, and although did a lot of interviews. And so rather than waiting on that, decided to shift some of that funding towards hiring those resources on a consulting basis. We have Kate Noel, who has been extraordinarily helpful during times when we really need crisis comms, particularly with the accident and with NSMB and a host of other issues. But I've added to that the well-recognized firm of Sutherland Weston, Elizabeth Sutherland and her team, and we're starting to make progress on that. I think I sent around to you one example of that, some earned media, guest column / op-ed that I wrote and we had published in the Portland Press Herald, taking on this notion that college isn't worth the money anymore. We have a plan to earn between 1 and 3 pieces of media monthly going forward. And as part of that internal communications working team, obviously we are keenly focused on what may be necessary in the wake of public attention on the recent accident as we go forward. So we're making progress on communications and marketing. We still do, however, need to build an internal team. Ultimately, I see that as being probably a college relations department that has communications and marketing within it. Of course, a large percentage of the time, energy, and resources and focus of that will always be on enrollment. But in addition to enrollment, advancement, and the broader brand of Maine Maritime Academy. As you know, we at least started down that path by putting up some digital billboards at each of Bangor Airport and Portland Airport, and we'll continue to do those sorts of things. Management data set. We have data here at the Academy. It is not necessarily compiled in a warehouse and then formatted in a way so that managers can measure, monitor, track, and manage to key metrics. We're making some progress on that, but it's mostly on a one-on-one basis. We're trying to instead move towards a more sophisticated data warehouse. SMS has been hugely helpful on that, working closely with Wendy Haslam, the one person that we have focusing on data, but most of her time really is dedicated to compiling data for compliance purposes. We don't really have the bandwidth to compile and format data that is necessary for managers to monitor and track trends and then make decisions around them. But we are making some progress in that space. International, I have said that if we're serious about being able to say that we are ranked as the #1 maritime college in the world, I've said that we have to be in the world more. And so we've elevated our engagement with the International Association of Maritime Unions, or Maritime Universities. We're looking at regenerating some of our prior programs and some of the programs that we haven't participated in the past, like recruiting more international students, faculty exchanges, student exchanges, research on the international level, and possibly making a competitive pitch for MMA to host the international conference of IAMU, perhaps in 2025 or 2026, where we would also highlight the new training ship. By the way, Mass Maritime beat us to the punch on that and got picked to host the international conference in 2024. It'd be the first time that it's in America since in the last 12 years. FYI, MMA did host that back in 2002. We want to return to that. Planning grant. So I've listed this as planning grant. I believe that the Academy is at a stage where we need to look into the future 30 to 50 years and state to ourselves, who are we going to be, and what does it look like to get there, both programmatically and from a facilities standpoint. I've reached out to David Green of Colby and Greg Powell at Alfond, and through their good offices have been having some discussions with consultants that might help us take a look at how to come up with some analysis and then some models for what that might look like. Haven't produced any yet, haven't even retained anybody yet, but I'm moving in the direction of getting proposals. The costs for that type of effort are significant, several $100,000 typically, and that's not money that I have in our budget. So I would probably seek a planning grant for that effort. And obviously that would roll out in a series of phases that most certainly would include the trustees, faculty, staff, and external experts, corporate sponsors and participants such as ABS and others that are particularly many who are engaged in the tech challenges that are pressing this entire industry. So this is really just another heads up. We've talked about this a little bit before, but I just wanted to let you know that we're making some progress towards that path. Regimental manual. So we are now speaking in terms of an effort called regimental excellence to maintain the our continuous improvement for our regiment itself. One component of that Lieutenant Commander Kelly Gaultier and Commander Christensen and Captain Cashman have been leading is the reassembly of the pieces and components of our regimental manual, and then updating and modernizing that, and seem to be making some good progress. I was able to attend the annual change of command ceremony just earlier this week, and was impressed that the regiment looked pretty squared away, well managed, and well prepared for a good showing at that event. There are, however, instances where we, on a day-to-day basis, can make some progress. Our immediately outgoing regimental commander, Natalie Samuels, started to make some progress on that, working closely with the regimental staff, and our incoming regimental commander, Mr. Shelton, is taking that baton and just incrementally moving us forward in that. I had said that not only is this regiment absolutely important to Maine Maritime Academy, its brand and its mission, it's critical, it's central to it, particularly as we stay close to our core mission of servicing this mariner shortage with unlimited licensed mariners. But in addition to that, if you want to say that we are the #1 maritime college in the world, you have to be able to say that you have the #1 Maritime Academy regiment in the world, and we're working on getting there. Town and gown. Both my wife Christy and I immerse ourselves in the local Castine town community, and have thoroughly enjoyed getting to know every single person that we can within it, both in an informal setting, but also in formal settings, meaning town and gown meetings with the select board. And we're making good progress on that. Yacht Club, I mentioned earlier as one of the working groups, and the reasons why we think it's important that if you go to a maritime academy, you should have an expectation as a student that you're going to get to enjoy the rich resources of boats on the water. It's what we are, it's what we do, and it's in part what these students come for. And so we're expanding those opportunities here. We did, as I said, our vessel donation program is very, very successful, but it's built largely around catch and release. And we said that's wonderful because we need the revenue, but let's find a couple of boats that we can keep here and make available to these students. And Joe Lobley and Chris did a wonderful job of reeling in a beautiful 32-foot Erickson sailboat that we have undercover and are working on. It's a wonderful boat, simple, sizable, but easy to handle. And we're going to make that available to our yacht club students. Probably going to add one more vessel like that, and at least one, maybe two power vessels over the next year or so. With that, Mr. Chairman, that completes my list. Sorry for the amount of time that it took, and I'll certainly take any questions that members may have.
Thanks, President Paul. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the committee reports. And with that, we're going to start with.
I have one.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Dishi.
I did raise my hand. All right, hi, everyone. Good morning. President, one quick question going back to when you were talking about Senator Collins. Can you elaborate a little bit as to what she and her office see as some of the highest priority initiatives, especially those that MMA can help address? Like looking forward, where are they seeing, high importance, and how can we get ahead and look to how we can, that's going to help us not only with the state, but with our, being the best in the world. How can we get ahead?
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Great question. Her top three issues are NSMV, and NSMV in that order. I would say that pretty high on her list too is Bucksport. She wants to know what's happening in Bucksport and what's going to happen in Bucksport. And I have pledged to her to come back and present her with a plan. I've also told her that we'll probably have a lot of zeros. But she cares much about Bucksport and what's going to happen there. She also asks me regularly, how's MMA's marketing? Can you guys get yourself out there more? She is immensely proud of MMA, sees it as a shining star. She loves to hear that MMA is Maine's when I say to her that MMA is Maine's leadership college, she loves to hear that. She wants to see it out front and recognized that way more and more. But primarily, her white knuckle focus is on NSMB, making sure that we manage and plan to be able to host it on time, but also have the resources to do it. As to your question, what can we do to get ahead? You know, a lot of it has been building relationships with each of her staff members, Cam O'Brien, Mike Clark, Carol Woodcock. I'm in regular communication with them, both here in state and down in Washington. And just quite frankly, giving them more information about what is happening here internally, what our financial challenges are, and what we think their role could be in helping us go to that goal of being #1 in the world. They love that goal. They want to know what they can do to help. That's a good sign. Of course, they're getting requests from an awful lot of others for support. But we're trying to move in governmental appropriation space on the federal level. We're trying to move from the perception of MMA as being an entity out there that every once in a while will ask for a project to instead being recognized as one of the 3 higher ed systems in Maine that each year is going to have a whole host of needs. That's the culture shift that we're moving towards. And it's a delicate balance, but we're moving in that direction. And she's a big part of that. I don't know if I totally answered your question, Madam Trustee. Please let me know if there's more.
No, thanks. It's just kind of getting at, you know, are there some new programs we can lean into? Like if there's like, what is top of mind for her and her, you know, her office, being #1, but why? #1 is what? Like, are there a couple new areas that we could and should focus on? We don't have to get into that now. I know but maybe just something I'm very curious on, you know, what keeps them up at night. They say Maine's going to be #1 in X, Y, and Z. What are those things, and only those things that MMA can do? And so, you know, I think as we're looking forward to who we are as an academy, if we're going to lean into a couple key areas, what are those areas that are the only ones that really can succeed and really blow it out of the water to be #1 at, and what keeps them up at night? So aligning goals and our success to also their goals and their success, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And Chairman, if I may.
Please.
So examples of proposals that seem to be well received by them in this effort to become #1 is MMA positioning itself with its unique faculty and its unique hands-on capabilities and operations of focus on some of these tech challenges within the maritime industry. They're very well aware that what's happening in the global maritime industry is a push towards decarbonization. IMO's International Maritime Organization's goal, target, now damn near requirement that this fleet of 50,000 ships move toward a 50% reduction in their carbon footprint by 2030 and carbon neutral by 2050, and the role that MMA can play in that. electrification of the fleet, digitization of the fleet, maritime cybersecurity. These are areas that they very much value or recognize MMA, or at least have responded well to our suggestions that MMA can play a unique role in those by developing centers of excellence, for example, but that those centers of excellence are going to require resources that we don't currently have in order to be able to scale up, take what we have and increase its bandwidth by collaborations with the UMaine system and Maine Community College system, staff and faculty resources, so that together we have a team that's big enough to go out there and compete on the global stage for funding opportunities of 20, 30, $40 million at a bite, to be able to compete with a Purdue or an Ohio State or a UCLA. Those are the sorts of things that she recognizes when I explain them and says, okay, show me how we do that. The way I'm showing her how we do that is through these recent proposals to her to fund programs in each of those areas, including cybersecurity, and elevating our collaborative program with BIW, Bath Iron Works, elevating our recent new relationship through an MOU with the U.S. Navy that wants Maine Maritime Academy to partner with them to improve the optimization of their shipboard platforms. All of these sorts of things I've built into appropriations requests to her. I've also built into our appropriations requests funding necessary to continue to improve on our enrollment, to fill our seats, and fill them with the demographic that we need, including partnerships with Alaska, with whom she works very closely, and partnerships with Florida, the senators from which she works very closely. The whole mariner shortage is a major trend in Washington that's reached the highest levels, including SecDef at Pentagon, and showing her that MMA can increase our production of unlimited licensed mariners. Just to put a finer point on that, it is not lost on her that by comparison, SUNY is turning out 250 unlimited licensed mariners a year. Mass Maritime's turning out 155. This coming year, Maine Maritime will turn out only 78, the lowest level since I was a student here. And we are demonstrating, showing her we will get back in there and we will boost these numbers back up. But she wants to see a plan, and we're giving her a plan.
That was incredibly helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like Morton has a question.
Hey, Jerry, at the last meeting, we talked about the tight timeline going out to contractors to get the waterfront work done. It doesn't appear that the financial challenges have gotten any less daunting. How is that going to impact our ability to go out and get bids for the work? Obviously, we can't go out to get bids if we can't have the money to pay for it. How's that coming together?
It's a very, very difficult nut to crack, and one that not a day goes by that Richard and I, or some set of others along with us, are focusing on, including Senator Collins. Trustee Longley has been helpful in that regard. We've had some separate smaller group meetings and discussions about strategies and avenues to try to close that timing gap. We've been on the phone with bond counsel. We may very well retain a financial advisor. We may have to go into the commercial lending market. Not my first choice, but we may have to. But for everybody on the call, here's, I think, what Trustee Arnson is referring to. Because this funding is on a reimbursable basis and we don't have those funds in hand, and because there are certain requirements, timing requirements, and financial performance requirements that press us and can delay our timeline, we have a gap in funding. So coming up here in May, early June, we will have to go out into the marketplace with competitive bidding for hiring the contractor. But in order to do that, as a requirement for Bureau of Government Services, BGS, in Augusta, state level, we have to be able to demonstrate that we have the ability to pay. Obviously, the commercial marketplace has an expectation of that as well. But how do you make that demonstration that you have the ability to pay if you don't have the money? And although $130 million has been appropriated and is sitting in a fund in Washington, D.C., the agency that controls it is not going to release it until you've already spent it once and are just doing it on a reimbursable basis. So starting in June, the limited amount of funds that we have available will run out, and we'll have to start writing big checks that we can't cash, to be honest with you. So we're trying to figure out what is the financing schemes that bridge that gap. And it's that host of options that I just mentioned. And Richard and myself and a whole host of others on a daily basis are trying to figure out what is the best way to finance that. I wouldn't see it necessarily as an indication of MMA's financial strength, but rather the magnitude of a project. Remember, all of these academies lobbied for 15 years to get these ships, and that's a wonderful thing. Congress finally appropriated funds to build these ships. But at the time that the academies sought those ships, they made a pledge, a commitment on the record to the federal government, to appropriators, Congress, that, hey, if you just give us these ships, we'll take care of all of the whatever's necessary to dock them. We're not going to ask you for money for that. Well, once we got the ships, then of course we had to ship, because everybody started looking at what would be necessary to actually renovate their piers, and those numbers started creeping up from 20 million to 40 million, and now even more per academy. And so we have now gone back to the federal government and said, starting a few years ago, oh, by the way, we need that money too. And that is a knife fight in Congress. We've made some progress across all of the SMAs. $62 million was appropriated in 2022, 75 last year, and our appropriations request this year is 75 million on a timeline that gets every academy paid for that shoreside infrastructure. The money is being appropriated, but it's being done in a way on a reimbursable basis, so that we still have to come up with the money first and reimburse later. Bridging that gap through financing is a challenge.
Okay.
Hold on, it looks like Miles has a question as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jerry, early in your presentation, you mentioned that we've received two different earmarks, 1.8 million and 2.5 million, if I got my notes right. Can you remind us what those are for, and whether or not there are any expenses, revenues in there that are going to offset existing expenses?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, may I?
Please.
Yes, Trustee Thiemann, I'm going to defer to Dr. Williamson in a moment, who can talk about where we're at with actually mapping out the distribution of those funds, including IDC or indirect costs that we can draw from that does have a some modest reduction or positive impact on our operational expenses. If I may, Chair, I'm going to defer to Dr. Williamson.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Yes, Trustee Thiemann. Yes, in the CDS for Senator Collins, the digitization initiative, we did send a request out to all the departments so that they could identify equipment they were looking for. And, Vice President Rosen's team is going to be submitting a grant to the Department of Education in the amount of the $2.5 million. And he's allowed to claim IDC and funds for a project manager from his department to cover that. So yes, we'd be able to offset some costs with that earmark.
And what's this, the 1.8 for? Is that?
Yeah, so the 2.5 million is for digitization. It's actually a $2.1 million earmark that we're splitting with Northern Maine Community College for offshore wind training, workforce training. So also in that grant, there is some opportunities to offset some of our costs out at CPMD that support the offshore training.
And Mr. Chairman, I have one other question, if I may.
Thanks, Miles. Go ahead.
And it really dovetails with Morton's question. Mr. President, in looking at the donation naming opportunities for the waterfront, has there any progress been made in terms of any number of naming opportunities, including naming the waterfront, naming different components of the renovations that need to be done? And is
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please.
Yes, I'm going to defer in a moment to Mr. Haley to speak in a little bit more detail about that. We've built out a fairly robust list of potential naming opportunities here throughout the academy, and significant number of them, or at least in magnitude, is on the waterfront, including the possibility of naming the waterfront itself. Just this week, we had a meeting about major gifts where we spent a fair amount of time discussing that, along with Craig Dagan, who is also in that working group. And I'm going to defer to Chris here in a moment, because he actually had mentioned a foundation that might be a potential donor. I don't know if it's appropriate in this forum to name that, but I'm going to defer to Chris and ask him to exercise his judgment in talking a little more detail about naming opportunity on the waterfront.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Originally, the private philanthropy was not going to play a role in this phase one. It was going to come from federal and state. And I think it's become pretty clear that philanthropy has to play a role. So there is a foundation that participated in the planning study about a year and a half ago, and they indicated that they might be interested in a naming opportunity in the $4 to $5 million range. And so a plan would be to reach out to them, see if we could submit a proposal prior to their usual deadline, and use it as a challenge to try to raise 8 to 10 million and give them the rights to name the pier. And then from that, we would most likely go after other foundations and corporations. This is not, the alumni made it very clear during the planning study that we should not be asking the alumni for money for the pier.
Chris, I understand that, but it would be helpful, it seems to me, if those naming opportunities were available, or at least on a limited basis, to the trustees in the event that any of us knew people, individuals, and corporations who might be willing to participate. But at the moment,
That level of clarity does take a little while. Although internally, Mr. Haley's team and Craig and I have been meeting to say, okay, we really need to start looking at what that capital campaign would look like, and we are doing that internally. It is not ready for prime time yet. The extent. But I'm not going to wait until we have a full planning process that we were talking about before.
Thanks, Mr. President. I don't see anybody else with their hand up. If there's anybody else that would like to ask any questions about Jerry's report. Great. I don't see any others. Let's move on to the committee reports. We're going to start with Ed Policy, chaired by Elena Adams. And I don't know, she had to step out for about half an hour. So if she's not on here, would I pass that on to Dr. Williamson?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, President Paul, for acknowledging the tremendous caring, commitment and resilience of this MMA community. I was grateful for the compassion and support we demonstrated. We began the semester with a heartfelt moment of silence for the students. And I want to thank Dean Davis and her team for coordinating with the Acadian Alliance to provide some grief counseling to our community. I really felt it was an effective training and gave the faculty and staff strategies on how to support students. And I think her work and the work of her team was critical in helping us get the semester underway. So I just want to acknowledge her work because it was invaluable for us to get the semester going in the right direction. I'll focus on some key points in my report, beginning with cruise. As you can see, planning is on the way for the summer 2023 cruise. It's a full ship, and we've signed an MOU with Texas A&M to host about 48 students, which is overflow. So our capacity on TSOM is about 237, and we have 285 students registered for cruise. So we'll be sending 48 students to the TS Kennedy in the agreement, and we'll have 2 training officers assigned to that. We have most of our training officers identified for the TSOM, and we have strong indication from others that they're going to support the Kennedy cruise. And as President Paul mentioned, I'm pleased that we're going to be providing maintenance sessions, summer maintenance sessions for students. This is an extremely important part of our curriculum. The mentoring that the ship's crew provides, gives the students that edge that President Paul mentioned. And I want to thank Captain Mack and his crew for supporting that session, which is probably going to happen after TSOM returns from cruise on the 20th of July. Just moving on to the fall semester, I'll just highlight the fact that we're anticipating a large incoming class of over 300 students. I want to thank Vice President Bradley and her team for getting us some good indicators that we're going to achieve that target, and also that with Dean Miller and Registrar Guto, that we've checked and we have our capacity to be able to handle the inflow. On the academic quality section of my report, I just want to highlight again that we're committed to continuous improvement. And this process is a robust process, is a slow moving process, but it requires us to group our expertise into various domains. What we call a program or core faculty group that looks at specific outcomes or attributes that we're looking for in the students. And they identify what we call some key indicators that help us measure if we're moving in the right directions, if students are performing as we expected. And our ABET process is a key part of that. That's one of the key processes we use. And as you can see, we're planning, we're using ABET. We have 2 commissions in ABET, one aimed at the engineering group and one aimed at the engineering technology group. So those processes are going well. Secondary, we're also on the final stretch of our U.S. Coast Guard audit next month. We're well prepared, and we're grateful for the leadership of Professors Laurie Flood and our STCW coordinator, Laura Nason-Moulton, and others. I think this preparation for a Coast Guard audit is another example of the kind of teamwork we have here at the Academy. And I'm very proud of what they do, and I'm anticipating good results from the audit. I also want to reiterate that our U.S. Coast Guard audit process embeds or has embedded in it our quality standard systems. And it's, again, another continuous improvement process for our licensure track programs, both limited and unlimited. And these improvements that we make to that system is documented in the reports we make to the National Maritime Training Center in West Virginia. So I think we're pleased with the documentation that we have and the processes and metrics we have in place for that. Again, with the QSS system, one of the indicators that we use is the first time pass rate on the Coast Guard exam, as President Paul mentioned. Our engineering programs have because of the ABET, they've had this continuous improvement loop going for a while, and they've been able to maintain a pass rate that's almost 80%. On the deck side, we really haven't had the ABET process, so that's created a lot more, fluctuation in our pass rates. And this time it didn't go as well as it has in the past. And we have a core team, a tiger team, President Paul calls it, that's looking at that exam, and they've picked up on some of the indicators that tell them how they're doing. One is a exam prep class, and Dean Miller's here, so I'll just defer to him to talk a little bit about what the department's doing. Dean Miller.
Yes, thank you, Chairman and President Paul, Keith. The kind of task force in marine transportation has done a survey of the students that took the exams. And after that survey, kind of reviewed the results of that and have been putting together a strategy for improving our results down the road. Some of the highlights there, I would say, well, first of all, I do want to say that one of the big challenges we faced was the chart plot, which was a 0 pass rate first time, which was really disturbing. The Coast Guard has developed new chart plot tests, exams, and all of the academies have been challenged. And I know that we had a group of our best and brightest students. I would stand up against any other academy or even third mate that's in the industry right now as a proficient navigator. And I'm not making an excuse, but there are concerns, and there is a letter that's gone out to the Coast Guard regarding that new plot chart exam and how they've phrased some of the questions. But there is a strategy developed by the task force in marine transportation to address some of the issues. So some of that is by increasing the times that the licensed prep class will meet, possibly doing an intensive couple of weeks right before the exams. Let me just take a look at some of the other. So some of it is just working with our students in how they prepare for the exams. And we've seen a change in this over the past decade, just in terms of the students' own motivation and skills at exam preparation. So working on strategies to better prepare them in how they address each one of the exams and how they go about their study materials. I can forward a whole report on this to the board. That might be the best thing to do to inform you of what steps we're taking right now.
Thank you, Dean Miller. I want to close the academic quality section of my report with an update on our faculty searches. We've been experiencing a very high turnover of faculty and staff, mostly due to either retirements or very strong competition for talent. We've been very fortunate to attract a very talented faculty and staff. Retention has become more and more of a challenge for us, being able to, not just salary, but just in terms of the supports that we provide for faculty as they have to adapt to and utilize this continuous improvement process, with more innovation. So one of the strategies we're implementing is a Center for Teaching Excellence that we've stood up, and I'm asking for more resources to be able to support that the faculty, not just in terms of specific courses, but the way we deliver our curriculum. So one of the opportunities we have is, provide courses for students in different modes, particularly and during the different delivery cycles. So for example, during the summer, and potentially once we get our training ship, maybe even delivering some courses while they're at sea. But there are all kinds of innovation opportunities out there. So to be able to adapt and be agile to the opportunities, to be able to respond to the opportunities is going to require some investment on our part. So I believe that Center for Teaching Excellence is going to be that learning laboratory that we utilize to be able to support our faculty and staff as they help with instruction. I also have a resolution moving to the next session to acknowledge faculty emeritus designation for 2 of our faculty members. Dean Miller, too, I want to thank you for some great work. Dean Miller's retiring at the end of the semester. And also Professor Mark Shaughnessy in our business department, they're retiring. So I just, faculty has nominated both of them to receive that honor. I'll pass that to resolution. Turning quickly to partnerships and external funding. Trustee Thiemann asked a little bit before about the earmarks. So, and the next step for that is to submit a grant to the Department of Education. That's where we'll kind of lay out what we're doing. They're generating a robust list of equipment needs that fulfill the digitization and offshore wind initiatives that the earmarks cover. And that's an opportunity to address some of those back office support needs. A lot of the heavy lifting for that's going to be on Vice President Rosen and his team. They have to not only submit the grant, but do the post-award monitoring, reporting back to the government. There are some equipment, support items in terms of simulators and things like that for his IT team. So I think there's going to be some indirect cost recoveries that we want to look at. Vice President Rosen, did you want to comment a little bit on some of what you're doing there? I know it's a heavy lift and it's a big part of what you're going to be doing.
The only comment I would offer is that what you're describing is essentially a significantly increased new book of business for the institution, and to support that initially, but also to support the plan in the long run. Clearly, the back office capacity is going to have to be brought to bear to be able to produce that level of submission monitoring and work. So we'll be putting together, have to put together a plan with those the academic project managers, along with the back office administrative support for the additional positions and additional resources it'll take to support what as I said, what I described as a new and increased book of business.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. And I also want to, maybe acknowledge Mrs. Herrick for her work on that too, because I know she's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for that too. The partnership agreement with Pine Tree Offshore Wind and the Maine Community College System is a new item. I don't think I've reported on that before. This initiative, again, is focused out of Bucksport, and it provides that basic safety training for offshore wind to what we've called, marinizing the workforce system in Maine. So that basic safety training provides a way for an electrician or a carpenter or just about any other trades person within the community college system that wants to go out on the water to support this floating offshore wind technology to be able to get out there and operate safely. So we're a key element of that. I think President Paul talked a little bit about that collaboration. So one of the strengths of MMA is that we can impact the whole workforce system of what we do. And I'll talk a little bit later about how we see the new technologies emerging and how we get a first look at the workforce implications for those technologies. And we have this unique role to be able to feed that back into the workforce system. So I think that's a really exclusive position and great position for MMA and a key element for our branding and our future growth. So the Pine Tree Offshore Wind Group, and I want to thank Trustee Mercer for that, but they are the developers of the Maine's research array for offshore wind. I saw Trustee Mercer's on the line, but they're building a research array off the coast of Monhegan, and that workforce partnership is going to allow us to support the community college system and build a pipeline to get new young people involved into the offshore wind. Trustee Mercer, did you want to comment a little bit on that?
Yeah, I just want to add that the state of Maine is definitely committed to offshore wind. There's a 12 megawatt proposal to go off the island of Monhegan about 3 miles southwest of Monhegan, with a 12 megawatt unit. And then there's a 144 megawatt research array that's proposed to go somewhere approximately 35 miles off the coast of Portland. And it's going through a lease process right now with BOEM, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And recently, within the last 2 weeks, we received notification that the request for competitive interest by BOEM has been denied from anyone else, and that Pine Tree Offshore Wind will be selected as the operator of the lease. The state will hold the lease, and it's moving forward. And we're expecting to have that lease sometime within probably the third quarter of 2023. So offshore wind is moving forward. It's moving forward as planned by the state of Maine to be responsible and respectful and committed to not only mitigate any impacts to users of the Gulf of Maine, but also to look for opportunities regarding the development of offshore wind. So it is moving forward. It's a positive thing, and we look forward to making sure that Maine Maritime Academy plays a key role in that development.
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Mercer. And, very closely related to that is the technology that's being deployed. The technology for floating offshore wind was developed by the University of Maine Composites Laboratory. Now, we're also in the unique position where we do their scale testing. So in the past, back in 2013, we tested the first working scale, 1/8 scale model of that technology called Volturnus off the coast of Castine here, Dice's Head. And so Captain Willis and his team towed the floating, wind turbine out there, and they anchored it and plugged it back into the grid. Now, University of Maine has gone to the second version of that technology, and we're engaged with them again in testing that technology. We've framed this whole collaboration in terms of research and development. And so in terms of Trustee Thieman's question earlier, is how we look at this kind of collaboration from a financial point of view. So one of the things we've done is we've taken a second look at how we look at direct costs, personnel costs, fringe benefits, the cost of operating the vessels as those direct charges. And on top of that, now we've applied our indirect cost recovery rate, which is 45.5% of the direct charges. So that's how we also pay our bills and reallocate those resources. So this R&D initiative is also, a financial, opportunity for the Academy, and it also provides the resources Vice President Rosen and his team is going to need to monitor these kind of awards, and also to put back and reinvest into our infrastructure. So we're very pleased, and University of Maine and their research team is very pleased with what we do. And they were very kind and very supportive of our need to put our indirect cost recovery on this. And then just closing out with the $185,000 grant from the Maine Department of Education. Now, I spoke about that earlier, but just to give a little more context for that. So the grant's awarded. Tim Acorn and his team out at CPMD is busy implementing that grant for micro-credentials. And again, it's related to digitization and this idea of using internet-connected sensors for condition monitoring and maintenance. It's a paradigm shift in terms of this hands-on curriculum and what the capabilities are that we deliver to a workforce system. Again, this is hands-on, but it's digitized hands-on, meaning that you're taking signals from smart sensors and integrating it into a high-level software, cloud-based software, and then using that digitized intelligence to create operational efficiencies that really just change the game. And I want to thank Chairman Oney and his group SMS for collaborating with us on that. And partnering with that grant also are other companies like SailPlan, who does a cloud-based hosting, and Milton Cat, who's one of the major retailers for Caterpillar. So, but this concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Sure.
Dr. Williamson, could you just walk through a quick summary of the degree programs and additional curriculum that you're anticipating in areas such as cybersecurity, reliability engineering, perhaps even the elevation of the BIW current programs?
Yes, thanks, Mr. President. The first and major opportunity I see, in addition to the nuclear that you mentioned as probably one of the transformative moves going forward in terms of energy, but maritime cybersecurity is going to be huge. Both senators are keyed in on that. We're looking at an undergraduate degree in maritime cybersecurity. I think understanding this digital wave and this digital disruption and how it affects the maritime industry is going to be critical. And alongside the whole digitization and cyber trend is programs in decarbonization and emissions monitoring. So that's related to the reliability piece. So, you know, just understanding the role of sensors and how they impact the various programs, because it's kind of like a spider with all these, or octopus with all these tentacles that just touch every aspect of the curriculum. So we're looking at, you know, cyber and also reliability in terms of how these smart sensors and these interconnected tools touch the curriculum. So reliability would probably involve, you know, cloud-based software tools and ability to monitor and gather data insights from what the equipment is saying. So it's not just walking around the equipment anymore and listening for what might be happening, but actually predicting where the failures are going to happen and making sure that things stay reliable and as predictable, and that you don't lose time in terms of equipment shutdowns and the like. But just understanding how that translates, not just from the point of view of the enterprise scale or the corporate scale, but the day-to-day operations of the maintenance planning and the maintenance team. So just
and the BIW program?
Yeah, the BIW, thank you, is for so we have 2 degree programs at BIW right now. They're both associate's degree programs, and our ability to use different delivery modes to deliver degree programs at an employer site is part of an initiative. So we're looking to deliver our reliability program and probably a couple of our business degrees, both undergraduate and graduate, to BIW through some agreement. We anticipate that we'll be able to get maybe potentially a couple of hundred students online with degrees delivered at BIW and some of their collaborators, you know, working with Mr. Johnson on that. And we have an agreement with BIW now to start talking about maybe adding a 2+2, which meaning we take their associate's degree to a bachelor's level degree, and also potentially the graduate degree in business at BIW.
Thanks, Dr. Williamson.
Real quick, if I could, Mr. Chairman, as to adding new degree programs, one of the issues that we've taken a look at is the extent to which the Academy would need to seek legislative authorization for that. Historically, there is legislation going way back to the 40s saying that a college in Maine, in order to add a degree program, has to get authorization from the legislature. The latest version of that, I think in 1981, exempted institutions such as MMA. However, we have in the past, when we've added a degree, nonetheless still asked the legislature for authorization. I'm getting ready to seek an AGO opinion, but no, an opinion from the Attorney General's office clarifying that based upon that and some other authorizations over the years, that MMA does not need to go back to the legislature to add these degrees. I'm confident of that as to the new undergrad degree. As to a graduate degree in engineering, I'm going to get, as I said, an AGO on that, and I'll follow up later on those matters.
Thanks, Jerry. With no other questions, I'm going to move on to the Finance Committee. I don't know if Miles is still on here. I'm going to ask for for us to hit the accelerator a little bit on the committee meetings. We're blowing up the schedule quite a bit, so not to rush anybody, but want to make sure that we're trying to keep a little bit close to the schedule. And Martin?
Yeah, I'll turn it over to Rich very quickly, but we had a finance committee meeting on Monday. We got an update on the good, bad budget process. And normally we would be approving the budget at this meeting, but at President Paul's request, we're pushing that off to May. We were on President's Day, so we could not get our new endowment manager to do a live presentation. We're going to do that shortly. What I can report is that after a disappointing last year, in the first months of this year, we had significant improvement, and our endowment now exceeds the acquisition value for the first time since the new managers came in. So making progress on that. We had a detailed discussion on the cash challenges regarding the waterfront project, which I think President Paul has elaborated on. And then we approved which I'll ask Richard now to go through, the second quarter 23 financials. So I'd ask if you would go through that, Richard, for the board quickly.
Thank you, Morton. So to review the second quarter or the mid-year financials, the key indicators are all tracking on target. So enrollment to budget is on target. In terms of our revenues, tuition and fees on target, room and board revenue on target, state and federal appropriations on target according to budget. On the expense side, expenses to date are running slightly under budget or favorable to the budget, but that's primarily a timing issue, and most of those anticipated expenses will appear in the third and fourth quarter. So we're seeing that continuing on budget. On the cash flow report, the mid-year cash flow, that was a strong report showing improvement in cash flow, but just pointing out that that was primarily because of state appropriation for the Curtis Hall project. So even though it's more inflow, it is dedicated to a particular project as opposed to general use. This finance committee did not review Curtis, but Mr. Chair, if you want me to quickly touch on that for the infrastructure committee, I can.
Yes,
I think
please.
that'd be great. Oh, sorry.
It's all right, Jason.
Yeah. So the Curtis Hall renovation project, just to give you an update on that, as you know from a prior meeting, our original estimate was an $18 million project. We had secured the $18 million in a combination of direct appropriation and debt service funding from the state, but the project cost for a variety of reasons, which I won't go into, I did at the last meeting. It's a $33 million project. We went back to the governor and the legislature, and the governor did put in this budget additional debt service funding so that we could go forward with borrowing the additional amount. That's moving through the legislative process. It'll be reviewed by the Education Committee in the next week or so. We're encouraged so far by the response. So we are on track to work simultaneously with MHEFA to put that last piece out for a July sale, secure the full 33 million, moving with the design and engineering firm that we have contracted with. They are in design phase now, and if all goes according to plan, be able to put out a proposal for construction in the late summer, early fall for a project that will likely run through 2024 and 2025, and secure the upgrades necessary for that Curtis Hall, which, as you know, is the primary residential building on campus. So that's a very quick update, good news update on Curtis. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I may briefly, Chairman, I'll keep it very brief, but I wanted to add to my earlier comments about update on governmental affairs in Augusta. Mr. Rosen has attended multiple events in the Capitol with us and has been very influential. His relationships, his expertise, and just the brand that he adds to MMA in the arena of appropriations in the Capitol based upon his longstanding relationships serving in the Maine legislature.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, that's all from the Finance Committee, unless Miles has something else to add. And I should make that I stepped in for Miles. Miles is still the chairman of this committee, and he was absent, so I sat in his place. Thank you. Miles?
Nothing to add, Morton. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Miles. We'll move on to the Operations Committee report chaired by Mr. Mercer, please.
Yes, since our last meeting, I've been on campus several times talking to people regarding the operations of the facility. I think relative to the pier and the work being done on the pier, I think that the owner's rep and the design team are fulfilling their scope of services. Sometime around, and I'm picking this date arbitrarily, but sometime I believe around April 1st, if we don't have the funding plan and the source of funding in place, the schedule is going to start to slip probably day by day. Can we recover from that? Yes, we can. It's going to be a struggle. I think that funding of the pier needs to continue to be a top priority of the President Paul and his team, and I think it is. I'm hoping it keeps them awake at night because it's a huge priority that we have to work with. That, along with the budget deficit, are the priorities. I think that if things are not really clarified by our May meeting, I think we can officially say that the honeymoon phase of the pier project will be over, and we'll be scrambling and trying to make things happen. So I am very concerned about the pier. I think our plan needs to be in place as soon as possible. I understand completely that people are working on this diligently, and I'm not in any way trying to yell wolf. I'm just letting people know that there's a lot of work to be done, and it is a priority, and it's going to be a problem, and I think it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Richard and have him be an optimistic person and tell us what's going on. You're on mute, Richard.
Yeah. Well, I think you've pretty well covered it. I mean, you covered the challenges, in terms of the shoreside infrastructure project. Work on that has been now nearly a year, with a combination of every step from focus groups and meetings through the summer to all the input that's required to now at 65% design and stage to working aggressively to meet the permit submission timeline. And but as you point out very clearly, that's all running up against the deadline when our upfront money will be exhausted, and we will need construction funding. And as President Paul pointed out earlier, and walked through the different efforts to try to clarify and secure where we stand with the federal reimbursement, where we stand with what they would see as allowable and disallowed in terms of reimbursement. We're getting greater clarity in terms of the worst case and best case scenario of what may fall to the academy without any reimbursement, and then figuring out how to finance what eventually would be reimbursed. So that is the primary challenge. I think the work of the committee is going well. It's overseeing the design and engineering work. I think they're hitting their timing milestones, and the deadline to be able to say we've got financing lined up for construction is bearing down very fast, as you say, and we have not yet solved that problem. On the other project, I think I've walked through on the Curtis and where we are, so I don't know if there were any other questions there. We will be, in terms of other projects, we're going out to bid fairly soon with an RFP for the boat storage facility on the Penobscot property, which is aligned with the shoreside infrastructure upgrade. That is essentially an element of that. That's moving forward. And we have other building projects on site, any number of them, which are always underway. Brick Hall roof, looking to replace windows and dismutes, completing the renovation of the auditorium, Delano Auditorium, and so on. But I think your primary focus is, and I don't want to remove our focus from what you pointed out with the shoreside pier infrastructure.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah.
Any other questions or any questions for operations? Okay, we'll move on to the enrollment management, student affairs, chaired by Ted Day.
Thank you, Jason. In my last role, or official last role, I will turn it over to the powers to be to Kim and Deidre and Steve.
Okay, I will go first with enrollment. So good morning. I sent out as part of my report an update on where we are with our deposits. We are currently 81 deposits ahead year over year. And then we are 45 deposits ahead in terms of our ULL majors year over year. So the team, the majority of whom have been with us less than 9 months, so 80% of our team is new within the last 9 months. They are really, I think, starting to coalesce and come together and get a feel for what it is they need to be doing and building the enrollment infrastructure that we need within admissions and financial aid. There is a strong use of data, whether it's Kate Kana with our slate reporting and data reporting and looking into information related to hot prospects. So students who are opening data, students who are responding, and then targeting different informational pieces to select populations. Ryan French in financial aid, he's been creating and identifying different opportunities for reporting to make sure that we stay within compliance, to make sure that we're getting students packaged timely, both new and continuing. They are working with prospective families. They have built out a number of very popular webinars. And it's a series that they put together, kind of walking families through the entire financial aid process, which can be very intimidating and very overwhelming. And so I think that they've done a really good job. We've gotten really good feedback about the way in which they presented and answered questions and kind of served that up to families so that they don't feel overwhelmed by that process. Beth Sims, and so just to go back with the metrics that are in there for financial aid, there's an example in the report. I put that in there for you from Ryan. Beth Sims, who is our grad specialist. So she has gotten the grad drip campaign. She and Kate worked on that, and that's up and running in Slate. There's quite a bit of information in the report as well from her in terms of what she's doing and all the different initiatives, from getting faculty bios and pictures updated on the website so that students are aware of the faculty that we have in the program, all of that. So she's really kind of come in the last 3 months and really put that together, and she's hit the ground running. We've seen some growth in that program. Jeff Cockburn, he's doing amazing things with Blue and Gold and working in conjunction with Mark at Gauss. So Mark has actually developed on his own a countywide MMA get together by county. And I think Bill Full was down at the one in Cumberland recently with Mark, went down. So we've gotten people coming out. I'm sure this will continue to grow year over year in popularity as it becomes more well-known. We've had Blue Gold officers working in conjunction with Jeff. Jeff's identified individuals to go out and help with some of those campaigns. We are continuing to focus on bringing visitors to campus, and that's starting with elementary school students. I mean, we're trying to build those pipelines and get process of families and visitors. And so Ross Cottrell and Zach Sawyer have been doing an amazing job with that. Ross recently had 200 Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, their families, 200 on campus for the weekend at the same time that Zach had, in conjunction with Discovery Challenge Center, a number of women in STEM students on campus and a speaker. And so we just got a lot of things going on the weekends. It's a 6 to 7 day week endeavor and enrollment for everyone that's working. We have a number of retention initiatives as well. So we're working with academics, Rick Miller, Keith Williamson, and others to identify ways in which we can help students take better control and have better knowledge of what's happening with them academically and ways to support them. Deidre will be putting together the student satisfaction inventory that will go out after spring break. And so we're identifying 10 key questions. The retention group is to ask students along with the questions that are put together by RNL. The last piece there was some of the ways in which we're trying to leverage summer for revenue. So whether it's through leadership camps, there's an opportunity for an AP Institute. And then finally, we're about to start planning for fall 2024. So we're coming up on that in the next 6 weeks, where we'll kick off our planning for the next enrollment cycle, because you have to be that far ahead of kind of what you're doing. And so we'll kick that off in the next 6 weeks. That's it for enrollment.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Kim, could you provide a quick summary of the progress that we've been making on the working group on graduate enrollment?
Yes. So Beth and myself and Jerry and Keith and Craig and a number of individuals, I think that we've seen some really good feedback and really good initiative with our drip marketing campaign, or with our digital marketing campaign. And so we're working to kind of get that redone with Sutherland. Sutherland's working on that for us right now. I think we've identified a number of issues, whether it's, onboarding of adjuncts. Craig's working on some of those issues in terms of trying to just tweak some of those processes so that we can kind of be the best in terms of our delivery on that. I think that the grad has the opportunity to grow. And I think that there's, whether it's adding new programs or, opening new channels, developing MOUs. So Craig is working on a lot of that with Beth. They're doing research and identifying, getting sponsored students into the programs. We've did our kickoff meeting with UQ Solutions, so doing some of the market analysis. So there's lots of things moving forward in all those areas, particularly with grad.
Thank you, Kim. Next, will we have Deidre speaking?
Can I just add one question, Jason? For Kim?
Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
Is it too early? Are we seeing a football impact on applications, enrollment, deposits?
So Steve Peed is doing a little bit of work with individual football. Some of the things that we're getting from families is the wanting to know kind of when the players can play. And we do have a number of students here who are, like, we have 4 from Thornton Academy. They're also Mitchell Scholars. So we have students here that have come in with football. But Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about?
Sure, Kim, thanks. We had the week that we announced, we had 20 new inquiries in that first week through our ARI, which is our recruiting software that we use in athletics. We have 10 deposits to this point, several of which were people who had not applied prior to the announcement going out. So I'm working on a board of about 35 people right now and looking forward to handing that off to Calvin to let him go to work on that group once he staffs up. But yeah, I think we're seeing an immediate move of the needle with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Will Deidre be presenting?
I'm here on the Zoom, but I don't appear to be on the YouTube.
Oh.
Can you?
that was emailed out to everyone. That was in a supplemental mail.
The things that we are paying for, that we should take a look at in order to get this deficit down. I again made the point that my view, which may be a minority view, that organizations that cannot or will not pass on
Rhonda, are you able to mute Brian?
I was getting a lot of feedback, Chairman. Was everybody else?
You're fine now. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. That my view, which may be the minority view, that in this perilous economy, organizations that cannot or will not pass on the inflationary costs and other rising costs to their customer will fail. And so I have asked to look at our fees and say what amounts in our budget are rising costs that are no fault of ours, that the marketplace customers already internalize, recognize, and pay for, but that we are subsidizing internally. And so I asked to look at the fees, the inflationary rate, and the rising costs of energy. My understanding is that, well, let's just back up. This board made a decision in November, I believe, to increase our fees to 4%. Prior to that, I think I can defer to Richard to give the exact numbers, but prior to that, our fees were quite low, 2% room and board, only 2% increases. Tuition, we did a 3% increase in 20, a 2.5 in 21, a 3% in 23. General fees, we haven't increased. I think we increased 2% in 22, which is fine. In November, I think the board decided to increase the fees to 4%. The 12-month inflationary rate right now is 6.4%. That delta, 2.4%, we are subsidizing. We can choose to do that, but it's at a heavy price, and you're seeing it in your deficit. Energy alone, for example, has increased by 14.5%. When we page turn and look at each line item in our budget, that energy cost increase alone translated from that large percentage to a large amount of spend itself, large budget items, is $256,000, I think. The difference between even the 4% fee increase to inflation itself right now is $556,000. So I'm just raising this issue to the board for them to recognize that in that deficit is currently well over $800,000 of increased costs that we are choosing to pay ourselves rather than having our customers pay it. That's my background statement.
So I think what's at stake here is we have a resolution that we could propose. In that resolution, we would have the ability to have discussion and then ultimately vote on this. I've entertained the idea of not voting. I've entertained the idea of voting. I think the benefit of the vote gives Richard the ability to work this into his budget. I've got a lot of questions here. So this isn't in order with how we would read the resolution and then have discussion, but let's go ahead. Doug, you were first.
Yeah, looking at the resolution, and this was something that the president just sort of mentioned, was the 14.5% of the energy fee. And I was just sort of curious as to why that resolution isn't structured the same way for the energy fee as the others. In other words, except the energy fee may be increased by no more than 14.5% or the rate of inflation of energy during the prior 12 months. So if it turns out that energy actually ends up being more than 14.5, we could continue, we could, adjust that to inflation.
I can take that one, Chairman.
Thank you.
Again, that's me. I had a sense that energy costs had outpaced even a high inflationary rate. And so I asked Richard to calculate that one separately. It's quite possible that there are other areas of our spending that have outpaced inflation too. But the energy one, as I go through the budget, is the one that has the biggest impact as a single item. So I asked it to be analyzed separately.
I understand that. I'm just wondering, again, why it might not be 14.5% or the rate of inflation for energy over the past 12 months in case the 14.5 actually is low.
I see. Chairman, may I? That looks like it's a good question. It could be made more consistent to allow for a higher level. The 14.5 was so shocking that I just didn't have the courage to go further.
Miles, you got a question?
I agree with Doug. I think number one, the language ought to be consistent. And number two, Jerry, how are we planning to communicate these? I'm supportive of the resolution, but I'm concerned about the manner by which we're going to communicate this to, particularly to applicants who've already made deposits. What information do they think they have about what fees are going to be and what they're going to be, and how will this change that communication?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the short answer is I don't know, because I don't know how we've done that in the past. I haven't lived an entire cycle. Probably a natural person to answer that would be Kim Riley and perhaps Richard, how we traditionally do that.
Kim or Richard like to take that one?
I can start in terms of on the business office side, traditionally the tuition, room, board, and fees are posted during February for the upcoming next academic year. So that traditionally has been the timing of when that information is put forward. Kim can, of course, speak to what the conversation is like with applicants.
This is Rhonda. Kim had to leave to head to a school.
Look, let me just say, I have little doubt that if
Couldn't
Kim
Ryan-
were here, I have
I
little
just gonna
doubt
say,
that if
couldn't
Kim-
Ryan French answer that question? He's the financial aid director, how it communicated to students?
Hey, everybody. I'm happy to answer the question if you'd like.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, so currently students have been, applicants have been given the 2022-2023 cost of attendance information as part of their initial round of financial aid offers. So I think if there was a budget increase, again, I also haven't been here for a full cycle, so I'm not sure how we've done it in the past either. But I imagine it would just be a communication of increase. And nothing has been really set in stone at this point. Every communication that my office has sent out to prospective students has indicated that the cost of attendance is a budgeting tool and subject to change. So.
Looks like Miles, are you all good? Thank you, Ryan. Martin, do you have a question?
I'm sorry, Jason, you know me with muting. I just want to clarify. Jason said that the students had information about the 22-23 year, but this is the 23-24 year. So they don't have anything definitive in terms of, I'm just making up the numbers, that tuition, room and board, and the fees are going to cost them $23,000, when now it might cost them 24. They don't know that yet. That's a question.
I have,
So again, I don't know if you wanted me to answer that question or not, but at this point in the cycle, no students have been given any like firm billing details. Bills typically come from the office in July. So no firm information about direct costs has been shared with students yet. And typically once the cost of attendance information is adjusted due to, potential standard increases in tuition costs or room and board costs, at that point, we would update our cost of attendance worksheets for students, put all of that information on the website for the 23-24 award year, and then update student budgets and financial aid offers at that time and communicate those changes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that being the case, I would move this resolution.
Let's get the resolution read first, Miles. But
Sure.
we've got a couple of more questions. Morton has a question.
Yeah, I have both a comment and a question, and the comment has more to do with the resolution, the energy component. What I'd say is that it's not surprising the energy component was up, but I would expect if you went back and did the work, it would be the most volatile component of our expense base. And then taking 1 year energy movements into a permanent tuition or room and board cost structure to me is I'm not comfortable with that. In industry, you often see surcharges when you added in years where energy goes very crazy because of either market conditions or black swans events like a war in the Ukraine. So I would just caution on, that number. That was the comment. And then the second was a question is what are the other maritime academies doing?
Jerry, can you take that?
To the first point, that makes a lot of sense to me. What Chair Arnson is saying. Perhaps Richard has some type of benchmark standard that we could do that would reflect the higher rate on energy, but not pin it to that single fixed number that could be anecdotal and could go down. So maybe there's some compromise amount in between. I'll defer to Richard in a moment to maybe come up with something like that might be the subject of an amendment to that item. As to benchmarking against the other SMAs, I cannot say that I have done that. I don't know whether Richard has any insight on what other maritime academies or what other colleges are doing. And again, let me again take the blame for the process foul of this. It came up quick, and I put it out there quick, and it hasn't been fully tested. I think the inflationary rate is fully tested, and I think the comparison between inflationary rate and what we're charging for fees is tested and justifiable. And I think Richard has even calculated what those numbers are. But as to the item for the energy costs, that is not put on there with a level of precision other than Richard did some quick calculations.
Well, I can just offer a little clarification on that 14.5% number. That's the actual number that we see from our current cost to our hedged contracts for the next academic year. So we're coming out of a 2.5-year hedge contract for electric. And that goes, the new one, we have the new rate, it kicks in November of 23. So we know precisely what that increase is. We also have, even though we haven't closed on hedge contracts for fuel oil, we have the quotes. And so that 14.5 is looking at what we have in front of us as responses to our RFP process and our market survey. In terms of the idea of of a one-time surcharge as opposed to a permanent increase in the baseline energy rate makes sense to me. We've seen that before when there has been a spike and a one-time surcharge. Of course, you can is for the 1 year and can be then expires, and then you reevaluate the next year. For something volatile like energy, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Thanks, Richard. Hearing these comments, if we're going to put this resolution in front of the board, should we make some modifications to the language here?
Jason, can I make one comment?
Yes, please, Paul.
If we are implying that we're going to increase fees because of inflation, does that mean that when inflation goes down, then fees go down? I'm just questioning whether or not we should use the term inflation.
I think it's a good point. I mean, I understand what the end game of this needs to be. There are costs that have not been addressed over time, and we're at a point now where we need to make sure that we're addressing those. And however the language needs to be, I'm not the person to write that language.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
I'm just concerned that if we use inflation anywhere in the resolution, that it may come back to bite us on the other end.
Jerry?
I was just going to say that, the comments by Morton, the comments by Chair Arnson, the comments by Trustee Mercer suggest to me that although there seems to be somewhat of a consensus that this is a real issue that needs to be addressed, this resolution itself may not quite be ripe for a vote. It's possible that a motion could be entertained to defer this one until the board meeting when you would be approving the 24 budget. And between now and then, the language of it could be tailored a bit, and the board could be provided with the cost impact of the option of doing it versus not doing it relative to the budget that you'd be voting on. That's one option.
My concern with that, and Richard would have to answer this, is what does that do for Richard's ability to work to build this budget that we will be voting on in May?
So to answer that question, the November resolution, and keep in mind, these resolutions set a cap, and it isn't a directive that we will increase to 4% or 6.7 or whatever. It says we will not go greater than, but make every effort. So the current resolution from November, as it applies to fees, says no greater than 4%. So our budget work would include an increase that would not be greater than 4%. And it would be my recommendation that that's what we would post in February, so that we maintain our normal practice of putting forward the fee schedule for the upcoming academic year. So the way I would react to that operationally would be to continue to go forward with the 4% cap that was enacted in November.
And if I may, that's certainly something we can do. I just wanted to make sure that I'm putting it out there that by doing that, it's the province of this board, that by doing that, we are building into our budget a $850,000 hole.
Jerry, I'm going to ask that we get updated language. I don't want to wait until the next board meeting. So let's table this for now, get updated language in the next week, or, not greater than 2 weeks. and we could handle this in executive committee. Or if we decide, we'll call a meeting and have a full board vote. I think it's important that we get the language right, and I'd like to do it sooner than later so that Richard and his team can work with the best possible information so they can really build a budget we can live with.
This Miles, I'll withdraw my motion, and I agree with that direction.
Miles, Catherine Longley has
Can
a
I make
question.
one comment? I'm not I hate to be a regular wordsmith, but I think what the resolution is really saying is we need to be realistic about when we get to the budget about the inflationary impact on the operations of the school, and that the management, the administration is going to take that into account as they shape the budget, which ultimately will be approved by the board. But I think it's more the approach to the budgeting than it is those actual numbers. And I agree with Paul, leaving the word inflation out and 1-year energy levels to me is it's how they approach the budgeting process. To me, that's important. But I'll defer to you.
Thanks, Martin. Katie Longley has a question.
Yeah, I'm really confused. I think you usually send out a notice to students in the spring on what their tuition is going to be. I don't know why we couldn't vote on up to a 6.7% increase without any reasoning. That's up to management today, just a simple resolution. And then you don't have to have another meeting. I mean, I'm not in favor of building more of a deficit. So I think we can pass a resolution today authorizing management to increase tuition fees by whatever percentage Jerry and Richard are recommending. So I'm just trying to simplify. I think we're making it a little confusing. I don't think you have to mention inflation or anything. You just need to authorize the percentage. And the other thing is we can't discuss what other schools are charging. That's against the Department of Justice. So I know about that from my former life. We cannot ask other schools what they plan to charge. So just a cautionary note that neither us or anyone at the school can say, hey, what are you charging next year? Unless it's been publicly announced. And the
Thank
same.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Jerry, any comments on Katie's recommendation?
Well, just procedurally, the way to, if you wanted to accomplish it that way, a simple way to do it would be to amend the motion to move the resolution with a technical amendment that says that the inflationary part is reference to the term inflationary is removed, and it's simply authorizing the academy to raise the fees up to the 6.7. It's actually 6.4. That would be a technical amendment. It should have been 6.4. So it'd be really a motion to amend Miles's prior motion to say move the amendment. Damn it, move the resolution with a technical amendment, removing the word inflation and pinning it to a maximum of 6.4%. That would at least give Richard the flexibility to raise it to that amount and building his budget. As to the item of energy, it clearly is above 6.4%. You would either pick a number like 6.4 or just have it be the 6.4 for now and consider a surcharge in the future.
I like that approach. We can get this squared away today. If somebody wants to read the resolution as you just described, it would be ideal.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, this is a recorded meeting. As I just explained it, somebody could just move it as explained.
Miles.
I just have a question. The energy increase is a component of the 6.7%. It's not all energy. Does the energy increase that we want to avoid, is that satisfied by an overall 6.7% increase or 6.4% increase.
It would be my opinion to not get into individual items like energy, and next next year
agree.
we could have a milk issue or something like that.
I agree. I'm trying to get a sense of if energy in fact has gone up 14.5%, have we adequately addressed it by the overall increase of 6.4%?
I think that's if I may, Chair, that's a reasonable assumption for now, subject to more detailed analysis. So you would simply be moving a resolution to increase your prior 4% decision to 6.4. That's all you would be doing.
Okay, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any additional discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Next, can we move into operations, please? I think that's where we were.
I think we discussed operations in detail during the committee meetings, and again, it's just show us the money.
Thanks, Paul. Next, let's move into enrollment. Mr. Day.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Olney. I'd like to also say my thanks to each and every one of you. It's been a pure pleasure to serve on this board with all of you. I am hugely confident in the future of MMA and under our new leadership of President Paul and the talents that reside on this board. We have a remarkable academy here and a remarkable institution. It is I always refer to it as one of the gems of Maine. And listening to reports this morning, I'm even more confident that it'll continue to be, and it'll reach newer heights. So thank you to all of you, and I wish you much good fortune in the future. In terms of the enrollment management and student affairs, we heard this morning from reports, and just the highlights is that we are ahead in terms of deposits year over year, and there's a tremendous amount of work being done to make sure those students fulfill their obligation and their commitment to come to MMA. We also heard great accolades from our athletic director, Stephen P., in terms of the accomplishments and what's going on with athletics, including the return of football, which I think will, they say there's many front doors to an institution, and certainly athletics is one of them. It's certainly helped out our female recruitment in terms of students at MMA, and I think football will again help our recruitment overall. And then also, hats off to Deidre Davis and her team and what they've accomplished in terms of for the student body this year and the challenges that the students have faced in terms of facing the tragedies of their fellow students. So hats off to Deidre and all the good work that's been going on to support our students. And with that, if there's any questions, or if Tim or Deidre or Steve would like to make any additional comments, I certainly welcome them. Thank you, Chairman Oney.
Appreciate it, Ted, and thank you for all your service. I appreciate it. No questions. We're going to move on to advancement with Kit Watson, please.
Chairman,
I think we've got a
Kit,
couple of resolutions.
Kit is no longer with us. He's well service. So development reported that philanthropic support overall is up 534,000 over last year at the end of January 31. The annual fund is up 846,000, primarily due to a successful football campaign and an unrestricted estate gift. We have 174 more donors than we had last year. Unrestricted giving is up and alumni participation is up. We talked about an upcoming MMA alumni class challenge for May. We touched on the senior barbecue we held in November. We have received, as mentioned earlier, a $170,000 gift to our endowment. We talked about planned giving and some of the activity that we have coming up with that. A mailing went out to 199 endowed scholarships from President Paul with some information on those scholarships. We talked a little bit about the comprehensive campaign and where we're headed. And then we scanned over very quickly the good work that Jeff Wright and Karen Sikorsky have done and are doing in terms of engagement. And Joe Lobley continues to build a successful yacht donation program with more to come to make it bigger and better. And the advancement report was closed with the announcement that Pam Duell will be stepping down from MMA as a major gift officer effective March 1. And Seth Brown, class of 98, will be returning back to Maine Maritime Academy on April 3rd to be a major gift officer. And then there are 3 resolutions that I'd like to read off. The first is, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of Maine Maritime Academy accepts the gifts, grants, and listed below.
So
Need a
moved.
motion?
So moved.
A second from Morton. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes.
The second resolution reads, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of Maine Maritime Academy that the MMA Core Value Award, as described below, is hereby established.
Need a motion?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
And the final resolution reads, be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the Maine Maritime Academy that the David 86 and Jill Cross Endowed Scholarship Fund, as described below, is hereby established.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice President Haley. Next, governance with Doug Wellington, please.
Okay, so very briefly, I will be submitting a report to the chair, basically indicating where we stand on updating the bylaws, since I will be stepping down. And President Paul briefly made some remarks indicating that what he and his team are doing with respect to Maine Maritime Academy are all being done in conjunction with the current strategic plan.
Thanks, Douglas. We have any other business that needs to be brought up? All right, with that, I'm going to remind everybody that the next board meeting is May 5th. We will be voting on the budget. Hopefully there's no more snow at that time and we'll be in person celebrating all these great students and their graduation on the 6th. Anybody who needs assistance with any of the regalia or anything associated with graduation, if you plan on attending, I'm sure Rhonda will be in touch. So let's make sure we're prompt in getting back to her if she needs anything at all. But with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.